March 15, 1944. Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Ada Communications Unit, Japan. Commander Etsuzo Kurihara studied the intercepted transmission, his third cup of bitter tea slowly cooling on his desk. For the previous 18 hours, he and his team of Japan's most skilled cryptanalysts had been attempting to decode what seemed to be American Marine Corps tactical communications from the Marshall Islands campaign. The sounds coming through their receivers resisted every analytical method in their arsenal. Decipher. These were not random noises. The pattern indicated organized military communication, timing that came before American assaults, durations consistent with operational commands, and frequency usage that matched Marine Corps procedures. Yet the language itself remained completely impenetrable, unlike anything recorded in their extensive archives of Allied communication systems. Kurihara directed one of the world's most advanced signals intelligence operations. The Ada facility, located 20 miles from Tokyo, employed 500 personnel operating 118 radio receivers and 20 direction finders. His cryptanalysts had successfully broken American diplomatic traffic, British naval communications, and several Army codes. They had penetrated the State Department's Purple Code before Pearl Harbor, providing Japan with critical intelligence throughout the early years of the war. Yet these marine transmissions represented total cryptographic failure. 3 years into the conflict, after breaking dozens of Allied codes, Japan's finest minds could not decipher even the simplest patterns in these mysterious communications. What Kurihara did not know, what no Japanese intelligence officer would understand until after the war, was that he was listening to the only unbroken code in modern military history. The story begins not in the Pacific, but in the American Southwest, where for centuries the Navajo people had preserved a language unlike any other on Earth. Dina Bizad, the Navajo language, belongs to the Athabascan language family with approximately 170,000 speakers in 1940, confined almost entirely to the 27,000 square mile reservation spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The linguistic characteristics that would confound Japanese codebreakers had developed over millennia. Navajo is fundamentally verb-centered, with actions described through complex prefix combinations that can number in the millions. The language uses 4 distinct tones, high, low, rising, and falling, that completely alter the meaning of words. A slight mispronunciation does not simply change a word, it can make an entire sentence incomprehensible. The phonology includes sounds absent from Japanese, English, and most other world languages, ejective stops where air bursts using the glottis, a voiceless lateral fricative resembling wind passing through teeth, glottalized sonorants, and nasalized vowels. For Japanese speakers trained in a language with only 5 vowel sounds, accurately hearing these phonemes was nearly impossible. Philip Johnston recognized the military potential of this linguistic fortress. Born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary on the Navajo reservation, Johnston grew up speaking Navajo fluently, one of fewer than 30 non-Navajos worldwide who could make that claim. By the age of 9, he was translating his father's sermons. By 15, he had traveled to Washington to translate for Navajo leaders, where he met President Theodore Roosevelt. In December 1941, as America reeled from Pearl Harbor, Johnston read about Army units using Comanche speakers in Louisiana training exercises. The Choctaw had served in World War I, but those efforts were improvised and limited. Johnston envisioned something revolutionary, a formal military code based on Navajo that would be both unbreakable and practical for modern warfare. On February 28, 1942, Johnston presented his proposal to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego. The demonstration was remarkable. 4 Navajos from Los Angeles transmitted messages while Marine officers timed them against standard procedures. The Navajo speakers completed their transmission in 20 seconds compared with 30 minutes for the M209 cipher machine. General Vogel authorized a pilot program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits were sworn in at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. These men, including Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Benally, came from across the reservation. Some had attended boarding schools where speaking Navajo was forbidden and punished. Others were traditional sheep herders who had rarely left their ancestral lands. At Camp Elliott they worked in a locked and guarded building for 8 weeks, creating a military code within their native language. The task was enormous: develop terminology for concepts that did not exist in Navajo, create an alphabet system, ensure memorability, and allow for expansion. They built the code using cultural logic. A submarine became Beshlo, an iron fish swimming beneath the surface. A battleship was Lotso, the ocean's largest creature, the whale. Fighter planes were Dehitaihi, hummingbirds darting through the air. Bombers were Jay-Sho, buzzards circling before descending. The alphabet demanded special creativity. Each letter required multiple Navajo words to prevent frequency analysis. The letter E, the most common in English, received 4 different alternatives. Code talkers would randomly switch between these options, destroying any possible patterns. They developed 211 initial terms, memorizing every one of them perfectly. No code books could be used because capture was too risky. Chester Nez later recalled, "We practiced endlessly. A mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words carry power. Speaking them correctly was sacred." The code's first real test came at Guadalcanal in August 1942. 15 code talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division. The Japanese had expected the invasion because they had decoded other Allied communications. But suddenly Marine tactical messages became impossible to understand. At Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers rushed to interpret these strange transmissions. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, who had studied at Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like a language with consistent patterns, but it matches nothing, not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, any Philippine dialect, or any Chinese dialect. Completely alien." The Japanese response was systematic. They assigned their top cryptanalysts, recorded hundreds of hours of transmissions on wax cylinders, and applied every analytical technique available. They consulted university linguists and even Buddhist monks who studied ancient languages. Nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, code talker Chester Nez transmitted artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest. The 14-second message was intercepted but remained meaningless noise to Japanese operators. Within minutes, American shells struck precisely on target. Colonel Haruo Kanuma, intelligence officer for the 17th Army, wrote, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt. We can no longer anticipate attacks. We are fighting blind." Joe Kiyomiya, a Navajo soldier captured at Bataan in April 1942, became Japan's best hope for breaking the code. Although fluent in Navajo, he had no knowledge of the military code being created. When Japanese cryptographers began intercepting Navajo transmissions, they brought Kiyomiya to the Ofuna Interrogation Center. They played recordings of code talkers. Kiyomiya could hear Navajo words, but they were arranged in meaningless combinations. The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird carries eggs. When he could not translate them, interrogators accused him of lying. The torture escalated over several months: water torture, beatings, and hanging by his arms for hours. In the winter of 1943, they forced him to stand naked in the snow until his feet froze to the ground. They starved him down to 90 pounds, offering food in exchange for translations. Through everything, Kiyomiya could only repeat the truth. He understood the words but not their military meaning. A Japanese intelligence report from May 1943 recorded their frustration. The prisoner appears native to the mystery language but cannot comprehend messages. Assessment: either extraordinary resistance or the enemy uses a specialized code within the native language requiring specific training. The second assessment was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers could not understand the code without training. Kiyomiya survived 3.5 years of captivity. His inability to help convinced Japanese intelligence that they were facing something unprecedented. By late 1943, they largely abandoned attempts to decode Navajo transmissions. Success at Guadalcanal led to immediate expansion. Major General Alexander Van de Grift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable. Their transmissions are faster than any encoding device and absolutely secure. A formal code talker school at Camp Pendleton began training new classes every 8 weeks. By the end of the war, between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines had served as code talkers across all 6 Marine divisions. Training was unlike anything in Marine Corps history. Recruits practiced in soundproof booths while instructors introduced battlefield noises. They transmitted messages while wearing gas masks and running to the point of exhaustion. Thomas Begay, who enlisted at 15, described it, "They pushed us beyond what seemed possible. Lives depended on our accuracy." The code evolved continuously. New technologies required new vocabulary. The atomic bomb became Aishur, meaning metal egg. Kamikaze pilots were called Nat-Tahai, meaning death wind. Each addition made sense to Navajo speakers but remained incomprehensible to outsiders. By mid-1943, Japanese intelligence had devoted significant resources to breaking the code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 cryptanalysts exclusively to these transmissions. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka attempted innovative approaches, musical analysis for tonal patterns, comparison with Native American recordings, and consultations with scholars who had studied in the United States. They developed special recording equipment to slow transmissions without distorting pitch. They created visual sound representations using oscilloscopes and applied statistical analysis to sound frequencies and patterns. Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada later revealed that they identified certain patterns, probable call signs and correlations between message length and operational complexity. But without understanding the words, these clues had little value. Japanese forces received orders to capture Marine communication personnel alive. Rewards of 10,000 yen, about 10 years' salary, were offered for code talker equipment or materials. Several close calls occurred, but no code talker was ever captured with their equipment intact. The Central Pacific Campaign demonstrated the strategic importance of the code talkers. At Tarawa in November 1943, 6 code talkers maintained communications continuously. Communications throughout 76 hours of brutal combat. Lloyd Oliver transmitted continuously for 48 hours, coordinating naval gunfire despite constant shelling. During the Marianas Campaign, 24 code talkers operated around the clock at Saipan. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Hirakawa had decoded conventional communications to anticipate the invasion, but once the Marines landed, tactical intelligence disappeared. Colonel Takashi Saito noted, "Commanders felt abandoned without the intelligence they depended upon." At Peleliu, code talker Jimmy King transmitted for 6 hours during a counterattack after his partner was killed. He coordinated artillery from 3 battalions, sending 40 messages without error while under direct fire. The Battle for Iwo Jima represented the code talker's greatest contribution. Major Howard Connor coordinated the entire initial assault through Navajo Code. 6 code talkers working in teams maintained continuous communication during the invasion's critical first 48 hours. General Tadamaki Kurabayashi had prepared for 2 years, constructing an underground fortress with 11 miles of tunnels. His defensive plan relied on intercepting American communications to trigger counterattacks. That plan failed completely. Over 48 hours, the 6 code talkers sent and received more than 800 messages without a single error. They coordinated 30,000 Marines landing, naval gunfire from 100 ships, close air support, enemy positions, medical evacuations, supplies, and tactical orders, all while under constant fire. Major Connor later testified, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. During the first 48 hours, I had 6 Navajo radio nets operating around the clock. They sent and received over 800 messages without an error. The entire operation was directed by Navajo Code." Colonel Shigo Hayashi reported to Kurabayashi that American codes remained unbreakable. Artillery requests completed in 20 seconds through Navajo would have taken 30 minutes using conventional methods. The difference between destroying positions and losing them. At Okinawa, 35 code talkers coordinated the largest Pacific assault, 183,000 troops over 82 days. Japanese forces attempted jamming and voice mimicry but could not reproduce the tonal qualities of Navajo. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto's attempts to imitate Navajo sounded, according to code talker Alfred Newman, like someone gargling while trying to speak. On August 14, 1945, code talker Teddy Draper transmitted the war's most significant message, Nihima Etadiglini Adeno. Japanese surrender. The message passed through Navajo before conventional channels, a fitting end to the code talkers' war. After the war, American interrogators discovered the extent of Japanese efforts and their complete failure. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisue, Japan's chief of intelligence, admitted, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic traffic, but the Marine Tactical Code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto was even more specific. "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguists studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our greatest cryptanalytic failure." In 1944, analysts had noted tonal patterns suggesting indigenous American languages. They requested German assistance, but wartime difficulties and German ignorance prevented any breakthrough. Colonel Masao Yamada admitted, "Our inability to read Marine communications cost thousands of lives." Every Marine operation after 1942 was a mystery until it began. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, who survived Iwo Jima, described the psychological impact. "We could not understand their words. It made us feel primitive, defeated before the battle even began." The end of the war did not end the burden carried by the code talkers. The program remained classified for potential Cold War use. Code talkers returned home unable to discuss their service with anyone. They returned to states that denied them voting rights until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona and until 1957 in Utah. Hotels and restaurants refused them service. They were heroes who could not reveal their heroism. Chester Nez, the last of the original 29 who died in 2014, wrote, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but we could not tell anyone. The burden was heavy. Many found healing through traditional ceremonies. The enemy way ceremony purified warriors from the spiritual contamination of warfare." Dan Aki explained, "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it again for healing. The ceremonies reminded us that our language was sacred." In 1968, the program was finally declassified. The first recognition came in 1969 at a 4th Marine Division reunion. President Ronald Reagan declared August 14, 1982 as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. The most significant recognition came on July 26, 2001 when President George W. Bush presented Congressional Gold Medals to the original 29 in the Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 of the originals were still alive to attend. Bush declared, "Today we honor 29 Native Americans who gave their country a service only they could give." Chester responded, "We were ordinary men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war." While the Navajo are the most famous, 14 other tribes also provided code talkers. The Choctaw pioneered the concept in World War I. In World War II, 17 Comanche code talkers served in Europe, landing at D-Day. Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, and others also contributed their languages. The 2008 recognition expanded honors to all Native American code talkers who served their country. Code Talkers Recognition Act acknowledged all tribes. John Brown Jr. observed, "They told us our language was no good. Then they needed it to win the war." The code demonstrated the sophistication of Native American languages. Code talkers modernized Navajo in real time, creating new grammatical constructions and adapting metaphors for military purposes. The agglutinative nature of the language allowed complex ideas to be expressed in single words. What required paragraphs in English became brief Navajo phrases. Dr. William Morgan noted, "They proved indigenous languages aren't primitive. They showed Navajo could express everything from ceremonies to warfare." The Navajo Code introduced cultural encryption, security created through linguistic barriers that no mathematics could overcome. This idea later influenced post-war intelligence operations. The concept remains relevant even today as quantum computing threatens traditional mathematical encryption. Colonel David Hatch evaluated it this way, They achieved something unique, a code never broken, never compromised. It proved human linguistic capability could surpass mechanical encryption. In the 1980s, Japanese scholars studied their wartime failure. Professor Tao Yoshikawa revealed that 30 cryptanalysts worked exclusively on these transmissions for 2 years, consulting multiple universities. Captain Minoru Yamada explained, "By late 1943 we knew it was a Native American language, but we couldn't identify which one." Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Fukumoto later admitted, "Using a native language was so simple, so elegant, that we never even considered it." During the 1990s, photographer Kenji Kawano documented surviving code talkers. His exhibitions in Tokyo and Hiroshima introduced Japanese audiences to their story. Code talker Albert Smith told visitors, "We were both warriors. My language helped defeat you, but now it helps us understand each other." In 2010, the Japanese Association of Intelligence Studies held a symposium where Admiral Hiroaki Abe stated, "The Navajo Code represents perfect encryption. We had Asia's best codebreakers, yet we were completely defeated." Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, died on June 4, 2014. Today only 2 code talkers survive from the roughly 400 who served, Thomas H. Begay and Peter MacDonald. Though not among the original 29, they were crucial to the operational success of the code. Peter MacDonald continued speaking publicly even at the age of 96. "We showed that America's strength comes from diversity. Our different languages and cultures make us stronger." The Navajo language, once suppressed, is now recognized as strategically important. Federal education funding references the code talker story. Young Native Americans study their ancestral languages with renewed pride. Dr. Jennifer Dinetdale observed, "Code talkers transformed how Native Americans see themselves and how America sees Native Americans. They proved our languages aren't museum pieces, they are living resources." The Navajo Code Talkers achieved one of the most remarkable feats in military history, creating an unbreakable code that defied Japanese intelligence throughout World War II. Between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines served, transmitting tens of thousands of messages without error under combat conditions. The deeper significance lies in what they represented. American Indians used their native language, one the government had once tried to erase, to defend that very nation. Young men from marginalized communities provided capabilities that even sophisticated allies could not match. Japanese failure was not only a tactical defeat but also a kind of blindness. They prepared for American technology and American codes, but not for American diversity, languages and cultures they could not access. The empire that proclaimed racial superiority was defeated partly by that diversity. Lieutenant General Arisue's admission that Japan never cracked the code used by the Marines acknowledged the challenge of fighting an opponent whose strength came from sources they could not understand. The code talkers represented an America that Japanese ideology could not comprehend. They proved that America's greatest strength was not only industrial power, but human diversity. Linguistic variety became a strategic advantage. The Navajo language that boarding schools once tried to eliminate became a key to victory in the Pacific. Today, as the last code talkers pass into history, their legacy continues. The language once forbidden is now taught with pride. Native American veterans are recognized for serving at some of the highest per capita rates in the country. The idea that diversity strengthens security has become accepted doctrine. The voices speaking Navajo across Pacific battlefields carried a message that transcended war. America's strength comes from many voices, many peoples and languages united in purpose yet strengthened by their differences. The unbroken code proved that differences are not weaknesses but strengths to celebrate, preserve, and defend in the cause of freedom. Even the Japanese intelligence officers who failed to break the code understood the magnitude of what they had faced. Their defeat revealed a truth that reaches beyond warfare. Some codes are unbreakable not because of mathematical complexity, but because of the infinite complexity of human cultures themselves. The code talkers sent messages Japan could never decode. But their greatest message was universal. Diversity brings strength, culture brings power, and indigenous knowledge can serve modern purposes. Young Navajo men using their sacred language as both a weapon and later as an instrument of peace proved forever that America's greatest encryption is diversity itself, unbreakable because it emerges from the limitless depth of human experience and wisdom. The unbroken code remains unbroken today. It lives in every native child who speaks an ancestral language with pride, in every recognition that minority contributions strengthen national identity, and in every understanding that differences make us stronger together. The Code Talkers proved that our differences are strengths to celebrate, eternal proof that many voices, many peoples, and many languages, united yet diverse, create the unbreakable code of freedom itself.